So the Ultramarines have always been a really fun and interesting chapter for me. I started this hobby over, well gosh, it must have been like 18 years ago now. And it's crazy because when I look at the Ultramarines, they've always been the poster boys. And they've got a lot of slack for it. But I still think they are probably one of the coolest chapters slash legions to actually come out of Warhammer. When I got into the hobby, I think it was 3rd or 4th edition, and the Battle of Macragge was what was kind of the focus at the time. And at the time, I actually wanted to paint an Ultramarine, and I was really bad at it. However, years have passed now, I'm a much better painter, and I really wanted to give it another go. So when GW sent me an opportunity to paint Metaurus from the Titus and Warden's box set, I knew I had to jump at the chance. So the reference I'm going to be using for this video is this image from the trailer of Warhammer 40k Total War, or however it's called, which is awesome, and I can't wait for that game to come out, by the way. But this particular scene was this kind of exploration into, what kicked off this exploration into warm lighting, and I just liked the sunlight over the armor, over the blue armor. So I want to give that a go. Now, similar to what we've been doing with the Last Stand series, which I'm probably going to end up calling Dying Light or something, you can see there's actually a lot of orange in the scheme. And actually what I want to do in this video is talk to you guys about lighting different colors. So black is actually pretty easy to light, but when you get onto things, especially colors that are on the opposite side of the color wheel, it gets a little bit more challenging. So in this video, I want to take you through my thought process. It's going to be probably a 5-part series as we paint all of the different elements of the armor. And I'm going to be taking you through first blue with orange lighting. So I'm really excited for this, really happy to get onto it. The cool thing about this challenge is that it will be done entirely in acrylics for at least this part. And as we get on to maybe later down the line, we might actually end up using some oils as well as we get into more of the display level. Alright, that's enough chat, let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start with this recipe, and I'm actually using Prussian Blue, Phthalo Blue, LIlac, and AK's Blue Violet. So these are our primary blue colors, which we're going to be using as the base coats and layering up on top of that. But then we've also got a couple of optional colors. You don't actually have to use them, it's totally up to you, which are Blue Violet from Violet from Kimera and Ice Blue from Ionics. Now, these colors are really interesting because they add a lot of value and depth, both from the light and dark side. Here's an image of Gladiator, which I painted up alongside Metaurus. There's no tutorial for him, but yeah, there will be another example of how to do a banner later on. Now, Metaurus was an interesting model. Like, there's a lot of elements to him. Rather than just talking about just the paint, just a little note on the model itself. Like, it is a new model. Despite the fact that he's not got his axe or anything like that. I think he loses it in the secret level animation. He loses his axe, but this looks very similar to a Blade Guard veteran, but he is a new model, so at least that's cool. There's a new element. It's not just his face that they just stuck onto an existing model. So here I'm actually layering on with a 60 to 40% mix of Prussian Blue and Phthalo Blue, and you saw me there just using a golden maple dry brush because really I started to get a bit frustrated just how long it was taking. So we kind of go back to my previous technique about just kind of like stipple dry brushing the colors on, and this is really quick because this was for the Warhammer article. I didn't have a lot of time to actually work on this model, probably had about a couple of days, which I was this was during the holiday as well, so it wasn't that long in terms of having to get things done. So I didn't actually paint the back, but I will be painting probably, I don't know, I might take this to MPO depending on what my time scale is like. I'll just kind of show you towards the end of like what it's like to truly refine a model and take it to display level. But for now, I just did a base coat over the different elements of the armor. After that, I layer in about 60 to 40 again, but this time towards Phthalo Blue over the armour. So there's a tiny bit of the Prussian Blue still mixed in, and this just becomes our mid-tone. So what we're doing at the moment is we're building up the lights and all the basic highlights of the colour. So not the actual lighting or the atmosphere, but just the highlights itself. Now I've added in a little bit of that lilac colour, and on the camera it appears very blue, but there's a tiny bit of purple in it. And what this does is it gives us this kind of ice blue colour. When you mix the two colours together on the palette, you of Phthalo Blue and the ice blue, rather the lilac, you get this kind of nice like bluish like highlight colour. It's almost turquoise, but not really. And then there's ice blue there, which I'm kind of just umming and ahhing about using. But what I start doing is just using larger brush strokes. I start just marking out the different elements of the armour. So where all the areas are, where the lighting is, this is where I start just adding in those different elements just to kind of bring things together, and just using this to kind of help guide the eye. And you can do this using a large brush. I'm using a size 1, I believe here, and all I'm doing, or size 2 rather, all I'm doing is just marking in those lights just with the tip of my brush side to side, and we're just building up some texture. And this is what actually gives our armour a kind of painterly look as well. So I do enjoy doing this, especially when building up those first few layers. And you can see me as I'm going, and I've gone down to like a size 0, I believe here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm getting smaller. So all my brush strokes, using the similar colours, they're just getting a bit more focused, and I've just added a tiny bit more of that lilac to my mixture. And what this does is it just brings in the lighting. So we've kind of started very broad, and now we're kind of closing in. We're kind of coming in closer into the different to the different volumes of the armour. So the legs are and the arms are cylinders, where the shoulder pads are kind of a sphere into a cylinder. So you do have to kind of start quite wide and broad, and then you slowly kind of thin it out as you're going. And you can see here on the torso, again, another cylinder, just adding in those lights to just to the bottom. Now the cool thing about this is that, remember the value. So I'm using the darker areas towards the bottom of the model, and my lightest colors are stuck towards the top. And this just helps, especially when the lighting comes in later on. It will help kind of bring things together and help us make sense of what it is that we're kind of painting and applying over the model. Here I've just added a tiny bit of glaze of the Prussian Blue and the Phthalo Blue, and I'm just glazing that onto the sides. I also used a little bit of Ultramarines Blue from Liquitex Professional Heavy Body Acrylic. These are like artist paints. They're very similar to oils, but just acrylic, and they have a lot more pigment than your traditional miniature paints. However, they do have this kind of weird texture on plastic, so I would recommend using this a little bit, but mixing it into, if you're going to use it on like as a layering, using that mixed into your other colors, into your miniature paints. However, you can see me just using it as a glaze here, and all I'm using it there is to just kind of prepare the different elements and just kind of testing the colors on my thumb like I like to do. And you can see me just start layering in those areas and using it as a kind of blending mid-tone. Now the cool thing about this is that I'm not having to kind of wet blend or anything like that. I'm barely blending at all. Actually, I'm just layering on top of those different elements to kind of bring everything up to a certain level, and that just really gives me a lot more freedom, a lot more freedom to kind of like just continually layer up as I'm painting. And you can see here that because I've mixed the colors on my palette and they're right next to each other, all I need to do is grab from those areas, and then the values will automatically be mixed, so I don't have to worry about blending. And you can see I'm just using side to side of my brush motion to kind of create that brushed metal texture. Now what's awesome about this, about the heavy body acrylics, and why I love to use them, is because they dry a little bit slower, and so it actually does allow me to kind of blend on the model, but faster than oils, but also it just adds a little bit more to the punch as well. Now the acrylics aren't as strong as the oil paints, of course, but they do give us a little bit of advantage of getting things done fairly quickly. So that's what I'm kind of using here. And I'd like just to kind of add those textures so you can see me. I have obviously sped up the footage, but all I'm doing is just using my brush and just kind of scratching the surface. I almost like to paint as if I'm using a pencil. I'm kind of shading and kind of using that scratchy motion over different areas of the armor and just following the volumes, really. Just following the volumes and getting things into those positions. So once the armor is pretty much done in terms of like the blue highlights, here's the kind of mixtures for how I'll be using the colors I've mentioned as the lighting. And don't worry, I'll go through why I've got this mixture. So we've got deep orange, pastel orange, pastel yellow, pastel violet, and again ice yellow. And the reason I'm using these colors is because we can actually use this as our like kind of lighting mix. And all that does is it adds temperature and warmth to the colors we're kind of providing and using here. So you can see we've got lilac there at the top as well. And what that starts to do is it starts to bring in just a bit more color into our, sorry, that's not lilac, that's actually blue violet. It looks very lilac on this camera, to be honest. I actually grabbed the shield as well, because I was going to use it as a way to actually see and understand how much of the armor is actually going to be lit and what's actually going to receive light and what isn't. So it's a little cool test and reason why you don't want to glue things if you can. Not only does it gives you the ability to get to areas, but yeah, of course, lets you understand where your lighting is going to come from and what parts of the model it's going to reach. So here you can see me again just using those colors, mixing them in and just scratching the surface, using it to kind of scratch the surface of the miniature and kind of make sense of the different elements. And now you can see how that blue violet has kind of started to hit the model. That's why it looks really weird on my camera. It probably looks a lot more blue there, but actually on the model you can see it's quite purple. And you can see the kind of color that it's starting to bring in. So now we're getting the look, right? We're getting the kind of idea that lighting's coming here. Now, the reason we're starting with a purple-ish color, with a little bit of violet mixed in, is because if we went straight to orange, it would start to look gray. So we have to move around. We have to move around the color wheel, and obviously violet, kind of pastel violet, is closer to red, which is closer to orange. So rather than jumping straight to the opposite side of the color wheel, which would look quite jarring, we can just kind of slowly, gradually do it. And this is just kind of what I imagine in my head what would happen depending on the kind of lighting we're using. So now I'm just going to mix my colors in. I'm going to start using some orange and pastel yellow, and this is going to be the first, well, the second part of the kind of setting that foundation of this violet armor. And what you'll start to get here is the violet lighting is what you start to get here is how the lighting starts to really come into play on the armor, how we start to get these elements coming in, and how things start fitting together more easily. So you can see here how we've got these kind of systems here, these little areas of where the warmth is coming into the legs. And don't worry if you go too far. Right now you just want to add in your lighting based on what you think the areas would reach, and then you can kind of push the lighting as you get further up the model. Now the mistake I made, and I had to correct it a little bit later, was that I started far too thin. It's actually better to start a bit broader, and then you can kind of glaze in or bring back the blue. So like start a little bit broader with your lighting, get a little bit more general, rather than just directional, and then you can slowly bring back the blue and all the other colors. But you can see here how our armor is starting to look quite desaturated in places, but that's good because this lighting does desaturate colors. The more lit an area, the more desaturated it will become. But also the midtones, which are just outside of the terminator, just outside of the shadow, will become very, very saturated. There's a lot of depth in them. So here you can actually see I'm just continuing to add in a little bit of orange, and this took a little bit of experimentation, if I'm honest. Like I did go a bit too far, and you can start to see that now we've kind of totally deleted the violet that was there, and so I end up having to kind of go back in and correct that and bring that in. But it was just a little bit of like practice and just figuring things out as we went. And you can see me now adding in the violet just to kind of bring back that color, that kind of I guess it's called just before sunset. I think it's actually called like blue hour, just after golden hour, where things start to get a little bit purpley blue before the kind of orange and yellow lighting comes in. And you can start to see it now. I'm just picking out those areas, and you can see how like easy it's doing. Now if I did this with oils, I do think it would be tougher, and that's just because the colors would blend. And you would end up getting like a mud and grey. So with acrylics it's just a bit easier, and then you can glaze over it. And with oils you can then just smooth things out and correct if you really want to. But if you're feeling confident in acrylics, you can use it there too. So this has all been, this kind of project for me was to improve my ability with acrylics and improve my ability to kind of glaze and smooth transitions, not relying on oil paints to kind of do the heavy lifting, but just kind of get better with my own brush control. So that was my challenge here. I wanted to improve in this area of my painting, and you can see like we're starting to kind of get to a place where the armor is starting, at least beginning at a start, to get and look a bit more like an ultramarine rather than just this weird orangey blue grey marine that we're seeing at first. So you can see the armor just starting to kind of, all the different areas starting to kind of piece together. So I do hope that you guys have been enjoying the content and the processes that we've been using during these tutorials. I think that we are getting to a really nice place, both with our more competition pieces and just our more casual pieces. But I think that over the past month or so, I've actually learned a huge amount, and I've been kind of trying to share as much with you guys as I can in the time that I have. So hopefully you are finding this tutorial useful, you're finding it helpful and informative, and you feel like you're actually learning. And I do appreciate you guys supporting me through all of this, because it can be quite taxing to kind of produce these videos if you're not sure people are actually enjoying it. So I thank you for the messages that you guys have actually sent. It's been really encouraging, and I really enjoy doing this for you guys and just helping you through. So you can see me here, I'm just filling out the paint, using it and then kind of glazing it in, using it as a way of just like smoothing those transitions. And it's funny because like our base coat, which was particularly dark, is pretty much gone now. Now a good note about that, actually, the reason we can start from black with this armor is because it would be less vibrant. If we started from grey or white, I found that we would kind of start to lose that grim dark style. So it's actually quite nice starting from a darker tone, a darker base, and then working up towards these colors on top. If I wanted to do this with red, maybe then it would be better to start with a lighter base, and then maybe not white. In my case, I know some artists like to start with white, and that's okay, depends on what you're painting. But for this grim dark style, I prefer to start from just a darkest base, and you could use grey or like a dark grey, and then build some red on top of that. So from here you can just see me start to kind of correct these different elements. I'm adding in a tiny bit more violet to areas, and I'm kind of just going based on like what I like at this point. Like there's a few areas you could obviously not do any of this lighting addition onto the armor and just using the first 4 colors that I showed you, and that would give you, and just do the same kind of follow the same steps, and that would give you a really nice looking armor. But for this kind of darker, more violet theme, or scheme rather, you can actually use your colors in this way to kind of build up a bit more interest. And I find it like here, for example, where I'm just like working, just adding in a little bit more, there's a lot of back and forth, but I think all of this is to say, just be braver with color, be braver with exploration and trying different things. I'm actually at the moment working on using what's it called, a salamander, and painting a salamander with green and then doing a violet on top of that green, and just trying to see what it would look like. It's awesome. I'm enjoying the whole process. I'm enjoying like getting things to this level, and I hope you guys are enjoying it too, because playing with light, I think once you get confident with your medium, once you get confident with just like applying the paint, that gives you so much more confidence to then just explore with different lighting setups and different colors, and just really have fun just seeing what you can differently do. I think both switching from painting up my Space Marines and then painting up the Tyranids in the Dying Light or the Last Stand series has been so awesome, because it's given me the encouragement I've needed to try different things, and I hope that it's helping you guys too. So there is a lot of glazing in this process. Like I think because it's layering, it doesn't feel like it's taking that long though. Normally when I glaze, it's like, oh man, I'm gonna be here forever, but it really doesn't feel like that. And I do think it's well, it doesn't have to take so long, but also I think it's probably just the medium, the what's it called, the artist grade paint, which is just coming in handy here. It just goes on really smoothly, and then when it's just mixed with model color paints, it smooths out really easily as well. So it covers a lot better, and it's just kind of more of this really, back and forth. And the armor kind of looks almost like a desaturated blue, but we can bring in a little bit more color, and I do that. Like this is now you can start to see me adding in the Prussian Blue, and I'm just doing that in the shadows. Okay, but remember, this isn't, we haven't done our definition pass yet. This is just again establishing the volumes, getting the blue into areas that we like and where we need it, and then we're going to need to kind of go back in and establish all of those edge highlights and all of the shadows as well. So yeah, like enjoy this part of the process, because I would say it's the most fun. And edge highlighting, or kind of adding the definition, it's not something I was used to doing, but on this scale I can see I can see and understand why it's so important. So here I start to use violet, and I mix a little bit of violet with Prussian blue, and the reason why it's important to do this is because the things are so small. For so long when I was painting, people said, oh, your work kind of lacks definition. The colors are beautiful, the values are nice and in the right place, but it lacks definition. And I didn't really get what they meant until I kind of sat down with a friend and we painted together, and he kind of pointed out that now you need to do the edge highlights. And that's probably because I really enjoy canvas painting, and obviously, well, not all canvas painters, but the ones that I've been looking at, Caravaggio, their kind of mixture and mastery of like edges, that's something I took for granted. I noticed that in some areas they weren't adding these kind of edges or these areas that were kind of super in depth, but it does end up hurting you if you don't. So you do need to kind of go through, and I've kind of slowed down the footage so you guys can actually see, you do need to kind of go into these areas, adding in these edges to really help the viewer separate what they're looking at. And you can do this with oils, you can do this with acrylics, doesn't really matter. But you also need to do it on both the shadows and the highlights, just really defining and picking out every detail. I don't do it for every part of this miniature, but now that now that it's actually kind of finished, I can go and just start doing that for you as well. Now obviously I've actually finished this model already, or at least the front. Still got the back to do, and the reason I'm kind of spreading these topics out is just so that you guys clearly understand. I don't want to put everything, I could actually just rush over and gloss over every element, but I don't think that would be particularly helpful for you. So yeah, obviously I run this this Patreon in order to, and these tutorials in order to help guide you. So yeah, that's really my focus and where I want to be. So here I use a little bit of the ice yellow and the pastel yellow, and I take a little bit of the blue violet, mix those colors together, and that becomes my highlight color. The reason I mix those colors together is because the violet just cools it a little bit, so it's not super jarring. Otherwise you end up getting this like kind of orange highlight, and it does look a bit weird. Even this is quite bright for where it is, and I do end up having to kind of go in and correct that. But this is just to really help separate those elements. Now you can actually see how much effect that's happening, especially with the shadow just underneath. And then you can start, once you've done that over the armor, you can actually start adding in a little bit of this like stipple texture, and you can see me doing it now. So just adding it into those sections. You can see it on the leg. And then once you're happy with that, you can just take in a little bit of the color, the mid-tone, and just start kind of glazing that in. You can do it in a kind of scratchy motion as well to kind of embody texture, and that will give you the kind of like brushed metal look that you'll be after. You can see me just kind of adding it and adding it to the highlights as well. And again, it is a lot of back and forth, so it does help. Now painting the other areas black will help you kind of bring out these different elements as well and help separate them, and that's all good, and it will help you to kind of piece the areas together. Adding a little rebound on the knee just to help separate the elements again. And you can see me just again glazing and glazing just with the same mixtures that you've seen before. Actually, something to kind of, if you need help glazing, then Ionic do a retarder, which actually thins out the paint and makes it into kind of like a wash, and you can use that here to really help thin out the elements. But it just makes stuff like this really easy. Kind of has the same effect as like an oil paint, but dries twice as fast, so it's really helpful. Not as strong and kind of powerful, but yeah, really makes stuff like this really easy to do. The last thing you can do, and you don't have to do this, but I did it, is because I noticed that it was very desaturated, I actually added in just a very faint glaze over this area. Now that all my highlights have been established, a glaze of deep orange. You can also use Kimera orange, which is super, it's a single pigment, so it's mega pigmented, and you can use that and just gently glaze that onto different areas of the armor, and then that will just bring in the orange a little bit more. Just make sure you glaze it. You're not trying to layer on top of it, or just completely ruin the effect that you were going for. But yeah, this does the job. And that's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you so much for watching. And if you're on the Patreon, I want to say thank you so much again for supporting me. I will see you guys next week for the next episode. And if you're on the YouTube, thank you again for watching, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode where we'll be doing armour, the gold armour, well, the gold plating and trim in non-metallic metal. And if you liked the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, there should be a link in the bio to my Patreon. Thank you to all my loyal patrons, you make this possible. Bye for now.